What fascinates me about Chris Baker is not his life, but the legacy that he left in his death. To this day, African Americans are still fearful about the legacy of body snatching.
In looking back at African American folklore and responses to grave robbing, it's clear that people felt very threatened by the possibility of having their bodies, upon their death, taken and used by physicians in any way that those physicians wanted to use those bodies.
My brother was shot at the age of 28, and he stayed in the hospital 2 days and was doing fine when we went to visit him. But on the third day, we were called to come to the hospital and said that he had passed. And we believe that he didn't naturally die after that gunshot wound. We believe that they took his heart. That's our belief. But back then, people didn't investigate things like that. So whether or not that was true or not, I don't know. But I strongly believe that it was true.
Some people attribute the mistrust of African Americans towards the medical colleges to the Tuskegee experiment. But I would suggest that, in fact, it's the early history of body snatching in this country that plays the biggest role in this mistrust.
You just can't trust doctors. And like I said, he was strong and robust, and somebody evidently needed a heart. And I believe it may have been a white person that needed a heart. And I often believe that today, and this has been like years ago.
Black graveyards were the favored hunting grounds of northern body snatchers. In 1829, John D. Gottman, M.D., wrote of how, on behalf of several Philadelphia medical schools, he had secretly paid the manager of a public graveyard for the privilege of emptying the pits of about 50 to 85 cadavers a month during each dissecting season. The reference to a dissection season was pragmatic as well as academic. Before the advent of effective preservative technology, corpses decayed quickly. Except for those corpses that were pickled in whiskey for export, bodies were exhumed during the cool of the academic year, from fall through spring. Todd Savitt explains that blacks were well aware of this morbid seasonality, as evinced by one elderly Virginia slave who, passing the medical school, shuddered and muttered, "Please, God, I hope when I die, it'll be in the summertime."
The body snatcher!
Maxwell Anderson, who killed and dismembered 19-year-old Sade Robinson, is sentenced to life in prison without the eligibility of extended supervision.
Fox's Bria Jones takes us inside today's heartfelt sentencing with passionate pleas for answers.
Robinson's family desperately want to see lead to answers.
But I'm going to respectfully request that you confess where the rest of my daughter's crown is. You've already done the worst. You can at least give us that much.
That if you want ultimate expression of white supremacy and the white supremacist mentality, and you want to put it in the form of one person that I would name, and that's something I very seldom do, it would be Jeffrey Dahmer. He's the ultimate expression of white supremacy. Everything that he was doing, working in a chocolate factory, the whole 9 yards, and storing black male bodies in canisters of lye and alcohol and whatnot, and got them in the refrigerator, and cannibalism and all of that, and calm, very methodical. Even when questioned by the law enforcement officers, very calm. Hannibal Lecter.
Frozen femurs in the freezer. Jeffrey Dahmer. The body snatcher.
Sade C. Robinson. Hopefully we'll have updates on her case later this week. Context of White Supremacy. Gus T, Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Tuesday, August 11, 2026. So I have been told. Third time's the charm. Third time is the charm. We've been attempting to get this broadcast done since way back the first week of August. Gus T got sick. Gus T thought I was going to be victim, prey of the body snatch. I said, oh, he ain't gonna make it much longer. There we get one right there. Go have me for the medical students to carve up. And yes, look at that, look at that, look at that. But thankfully, recovered, pulled through, and get on away from around here. Not burying me. Not going to be having me at the medical colleges yet. For folks tuning in to the broadcast today, even the audio snippets that we played to start off with today should be very familiar. Some of our more important guests right there. Dr. Sean Utsi, professor out at VCU in Virginia, although that's not the state we're talking about today, but same subject matter, the body snatchers, and even the specifics. We should all know this because we've talked about this repeatedly. Body snatching is, you have someone, I said Gus T thought I was just going to be felled, so you go and they lower you, cemetery, burial ground. The body snatchers, resurrectionists is what they would call the people sometimes who would go and do this dastardly work. So once you die, they keep an eye on the family when they leave and everything, wait till it gets dark, and then they will go and boop, dig out the body. They'll take the corpse, leave everything else, because at this time, talking like 1700s, 1800s, the crime was grave robbing. So if you're taking trinkets and clothing, whatever else that they might have buried with the person, that's a crime. Taking the actual corpse, especially if it's a black person, So body snatching, that's what we're talking about. Dr. Sean Utsi, he visited with us just a couple years back, and he has a tremendous documentary film about this practice in Virginia. You heard a snippet. Chris Baker, black male resurrectionist who was used to go and loot these cemeteries for white medical students and white doctors who are studying anatomy and teaching all this to their white students. We also heard in that opening segment the legend. If there is a reason why Gus T says reading nonfiction is more important than watching television, it is the great Harriet A. Washington, Medical Apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on African Americans from colonial times, which is our subject today, to the present. Legendary scholarship, just wow, easily one of the best 3 books ever written, easily. And she talked about the opposition to her publishing that book on Gus's wish list. I would love a signed, and next year, next year is going to be the 20-year anniversary. I would love a signed 20-year hardback edition of Medical Apartheid. I'm not even sure if they're going to do a 20-year anniversary, but they should. I would like a signed 20-year anniversary copy of the book, or a signed first edition hardback, Golden Boss maybe, Medical Apartheid, Harriet A. Washington. She has a whole section on the looting of black burial grounds and the body snatching practice. As soon as I heard about the book we're going to discuss today, first thing I thought of was Medical Apartheid, Harriet A. Washington, and that section where she said it was so well known amongst black slaves throughout the continent. It was so well known, the practice of white people coming to loot black burial grounds, that black slaves are quoted as having said, praying to white Jesus, let me die in the summertime. Hot, no AC, so that my remains will decompose quickly, and the white people won't be able to come and steal my body. What? If you have not read Medical Apartheid or heard our study, go back and check it out. Within that, we also heard the segment on Sade C. Robinson. For people who didn't follow, she was murdered and dismembered in Wisconsin in 2024. Her skull was never located. She wasn't just murdered and dismembered in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, a.k.a. Dahmerland. And 2 years later, her skull has never been found. Trading in organs, body parts, it does pop up in relation to all of this, that industry is still very unregulated, and you have oddity shops and people who traffic in all of it, the dark web, as they say, people who traffic in all of this, where you end up with a Dahmer case collecting body parts, or the murder of Sade C. Robinson, where we still don't have her skull. All of that to kind of keep in mind for context for today's broadcast. You even need one more quickly. You need one more. John S. Michael. He was a guest with us a couple years back. We talked about his work, his research. People know about the bird paintings, portraits that John J. Audubon did, the Audubon Society, or if you don't, you can research. But he was also a virulent white supremacist, and he had his homies in some of the regions that we're talking about go and do the body snatching so that he could get skulls to prove that black people, non-white people, had tiny pecan-sized Negro brains and were not very smart like white people. Also very connected to John J. Audubon, but we talked about all of that in the body snatching with John S. Michael in the Cows Archives. That's why I said all of this should be very familiar to Cows listeners. Our guest for today, very, what shall I say, fascinating new book that we're going to chat about. I'm going to give you a quick snippet here just because there's so many little interesting nuggets to read. People talk, and I mean, hey, this is a history book. Unless I'm in error, he can correct me, the author, but I think this is a history book. Most people might say, hey, what's the purpose of reading a book about things that happened nearly 300 years ago? I guess I will say this is the 250 anniversary and all that they're talking. So, hey, we should be looking back to reflect on these type of events. Yes? Yes, I think so. Anyway, there are people who say that's old and boring, and we need current information to solve the problem of white supremacy racism. One little nugget from today's reading. The theft of bodies from black cemeteries had never caused much concern for the white community. Correct usage of that word. Nor had the theft of bodies from Porter's Fields. One citizen, writing to the editor of the Daily Advertiser, claimed that the only subjects procured for dissection are the productions of Africa or their descendants, and those too who have no friends and have transmitted to Goals and elsewhere for having been guilty of burglary and other capital crimes. And if those characters are the only subjects of dissections, surely no person can object. End quote. Body snatching was easily rationalized by citing the benefits gained by anatomy students learning their craft. For instance, a newspaper in 1763 noted that after a black man 1763, and we still got the same old script, but here we go. 1763. A black man noted that after a black man was accused of rape, had been killed, the body has since been taken up and likely to become a raw head and bloody bones by our tribe of dissectors for the better instruction of our young practitioners. Whew. Direct quote. Practitioners of racism, practitioners of healthcare, both. excellent usage of the word tribe as well. But this is the book we're talking about, and I guess my little, hey, folks who might think reading a book about a history book about things that happened 300 years ago might be boring, contraire. We'll see. Our guest, in addition to writing the book we will chat it up about, is a former critical care nurse and educational health care publisher. He's written or edited more than 750 newspaper and magazine articles. Quite impressive. The book we will chat it up about today, I just read the passage from The Doctor's Riot of 1788, Body Snatching, Bloodletting, and Anatomy in America. Recently published. Like I said, this should be one. They're doing all that talking. It's 250 years and looking back, American history. Hey, put this one right there. Gives you great insight onto things that have happened in this part of the world. Joining us live, our author who's been super flexible with us. Gus T got sick. As I said, we're supposed to do this a while back. This is our reschedule. Joining us live, Mr. Andy McPhee. Mr. McPhee, you with us, sir?
Hi, how are you? Yes, third time is a charm indeed.
Ching, knew we would get it. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your Tuesday evening with us, Mr. McPhee. For folks who've not read The Doctor's Riot of 1788, anything that you would like to share with us about your illustrious career, what you do, briefly before we get into the book?
No, I mean, I was a nurse and I was a publisher, but I've been writing for a long time, always in the health sciences. So health is a very close to me. And I've been writing history since I retired. And this book, I really enjoyed it for a number of reasons, but it was really fun to write. And I hope you'll find it interesting to read, certainly.
It was a hoot. It was way better than the book that we talked about yesterday. I learned quite a bit. And any book that makes me revisit Harriet A. Washington, Medical Apartheid, I think probably is not too bad. So before we get into it, one, you are classified as a white man. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Right on. Racism, big part of the book. I already read one snippet. I use the term racism and the term white supremacy as synonyms. Same definition for both terms. That definition, a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
Yes, the system absolutely exists. And the people who say, oh, no, we're not a racist country, my God, of course we are. The laws and the government, which were literally built and have continued to be built to keep down people who don't look like me, basically. I mean, I'm an old white guy. I'll be fine. But it's a terrible time to live in. And it's been terrible for many years, hundreds of years. And you talked about body snatching in this country. It's been going on actually since the early 1300s. In Italy, the first known body snatching occurred in Bologna, Italy, in 1316. And it's been going on since then. And you also alluded to the primary issue, which was in one perspective consent, and in the other perspective, as you bring up, racism, white supremacy. The people that medical students and anatomists and anatomy students have used for hundreds of years is that it's okay to pick up a body from a black cemetery, a body from we didn't have really Hispanics, so it wasn't like that, but the poor were in many ways in the same class. and the indigent as the black cemetery. So in New York, what we're talking about is a riot that occurred in 1788, not against doctors, but not against the people. Doctors were not rioting against people. People were rioting against doctors for stealing bodies. And the ethics, you had a great introduction. All these snippets have been, oh my God, fascinating. The ethics at the time and since have never meshed. And I will tell you, they are not meshing today. Body snatching is still going on. I just call it modern body snatching, but a little bit on that later. But back then, and for hundreds of years before in Europe, there was a need of doctors and surgeons to learn more about the inside of the body. And the only way they could do that was on a cadaver, a body. And it was a matter of necessity. All the physicians really who were actual physicians in early America trained in Europe, principally in Edinburgh, London, Paris. There were a couple places in Italy. That's where they learned. And then they came over to the U.S. and brought the same practices. And what did they practice in Europe? They would send the students out, the doctors would send the students out to the cemeteries, keep your eyes peeled for bodies, and they'd go dig up bodies. Or they would hire sack-em-up men called resurrectionists to go and purloin a body from a cemetery. So body snatching has been going, it was brought to us by the doctors who trained in Europe, and we've kept it up since then. And that's what happened in 1788. The difference was, I hope I'm not rambling, but the difference was, I love to talk about this. Students had,
Go ahead, you said the students.
The students had been taking bodies primarily from the Negroes' burial ground, now the African Burial Ground National Monument in New York City. There, or Potter's Field, the local Potter's Field, which is right next to the jail and right next to the Negroes' burial ground. And so they would go over there. Well, at some point, in late 1787, they started stealing bodies from Trinity Church Cemetery, which was a predominantly white congregation. They did have their own churchyard. They had set aside in their own churchyard a section for black patrons, but most of the congregation by far was white. And they started taking bodies from the Trinity Church Cemetery, white bodies. That didn't go over well with the congregation, as you can imagine. So throughout late 1777 and 87 and through the spring of 1788, the populace was already kind of riled up. And when they found evidence of body snatching, that's when the riot happened.
Well, let's get into some of the details and pick out some of the racism that is a critical aspect of all of this. I guess real quick before we get to the details of the riot of the doctors' riot of 1788, I just want to make sure, did I get that correct? You are a former critical care nurse, is that true?
Yes, yep. Yes, and I taught nursing for 10 years. I worked in critical care. I worked in a lot of areas of the hospital. And I taught in an LPN program in Connecticut. So wow. I haven't nursed for a long time, and I don't have a license anymore. But that was, I did it for quite a while.
Wow. I was taken aback. Very impressive. Very impressive. I was taken aback because I said, wow, a male nurse. And then weeks ago, I'm not sure if you saw it, but they were talking about that we've had a long shortage of nurses, and that currently they have a new program to help try to attack this shortage, they're going to train male nurses specifically. And they talk about this program, getting pipelines, they're talking about some of the males that are going through it and all that. And specifically black male nurses, because they talked about the lack of people who look like me, particularly, that they certainly have not had lots of dudes, certainly even fewer black dudes. So as a white male nurse, do you recall, like, and particularly as someone who taught, what were the demographics of the people that you taught, if you can recall?
Well, I taught in Connecticut, and we had all white students. Every now and again, we would have a black patient. But it was overwhelmingly white. I mean, I was in the middle of Connecticut. But I will correct you once. They are looking for black men to become nurses. And they are looking for men of any, probably, to become nurses. They're not male nurses, because we don't say female nurse. So we say there are a lot of men getting into nursing. And there really has been about 6% of the population of nurses have been men for decades. That percentage hasn't really changed. I understand you just saying now they want to change that, but I mean it's been a pretty steady, unfortunately, percentage of men in nursing. People still see it as and you still get called a male nurse. I wrote an article about it for Nursing Magazine.
You said you wrote one, you read one?
Yeah, I wrote one.
Okay.
It was years ago. About, so you're a male nurse. And I used to say, well, I think the beard helps, right? And I was just kind of kid them to say, don't call down. I'm a nurse. I'm your nurse. I'm not your male nurse. But that's another topic, obviously. But yeah, thank you.
Much obliged. Much obliged. Thanks for the clarification. Again, our guest, former critical care nurse, Mr. Andy McPhee. All right, so switching back to the Doctors' Riot of 1788, who was, since you said you're so excited about this book, who was the intended audience for the Doctors' Riot of 1788? Was this for like nursing students, medical students, the academy,
this is
general
the lay
public? Okay.
Yeah, the lay public. Yeah, people interested in history, people interested in body snatching and early American medicine. You'd find a great deal of information there. There's bloodletting in there, which I talk about a great deal, which was that was a practice until really the late 1800s, early 1900s. That's how long that's been in practice. It's never worked, although it's still in use for a very select few diseases, one of which is when there's too many red blood cells and they have to take blood off out of the patient to reduce the number of red blood cells. That's called polycythemia vera. But it's it's an unusual occurrence, and there are only very few diseases, 2, 3, that use bloodletting. But body snatching and anatomy go hand in hand, and that's where it got down to this riot against people. But before that, let me talk a little bit about what was going on in the first few months of 1788. People had complained, and by that I mean there was a very strong free black community in New York City at the time, and one of the gentlemen I write about is a man named Scipio Gray, Scipio Gray, and he had bought a house. He's a free black that moved to New York, bought a house and a lot next to it, and he and a number of neighbors. I won't say they're neighbors, but I'll say in the black community, were going to use that and did use that as a cemetery for selected individuals. It wasn't wide open. They chose who would be buried there. And that was one of the places that the students had been taking bodies from. And one of the students even had an encounter with Mr. Gray on a night that they were taking a body. Gray was articulate, intelligent. He'd done as well as probably as any black man did in New York at that time. And he wrote a letter. He was behind the writing of a letter, but historians believe he wrote it on behalf of the community at large, asking City Council to please use more discretion in allowing the use of our deceased. They're not being treated well. They're being taken at will. And we understand that there's a need of anatomy students to learn anatomy, but please be more careful. That's the gist of what this letter was. As far as I can determine, it was never acted on. I can't find any instance of anything being communicated during the council meeting about this. It just hit the city council and died there. So there was anger in that community, and went about it the right way, I suppose you could say. That's all they could do really at that point, was to write a letter, make their grievances known, plead with the men who were in charge. And at that time, it was most, if not all, of the city council members were slave owners. So it was not going to fall on exactly receptive ears. But they did it nonetheless. And as I say, nothing was really done. Even the Manumission Society, which had only recently been created in New York City, John Jay, who was he was going to be the first U.S. Supreme Court Justice, was on the Manumission Society board or advised, whatever it was called. I don't remember. Alexander Hamilton also was a member of the society, and they didn't do anything either. Perhaps they planned to down the road, but the riot happened and everything kind of changed. So the populace, number one, the whites and blacks and whoever else is in there, free blacks and enslaved, they knew what was going on. And nothing really happened other than that letter to the city council and the letters, which you read part of one of them in the beginning of this, letters to the editor of the Daily Advertiser, a popular paper at the time. And there was a back and forth with we believe, Scipio Gray and John Hicks Jr., who was one of the anatomy students. He had kind of a big mouth, apparently. And he kind of spoke to the students. And he and Scipio Gray, using fake names. One, Hicks was called Abductio, and Scipio Gray called himself Humanio. But there was a back and forth for a couple of weeks in the papers. And it was fascinating to read the articles, which I have in the book. But in any case, so this is an area and a people ripe for a riot. And what happened, if I can go into that now, or you have other questions, I'll stop.
I have a few other questions. If we
Sure,
could
go ahead.
Pause right there.
Yeah.
I do just think with Scipio Gray, it's the letters that you include, phenomenal. And even you see some, at least for me, you see some of the same patterns of racism where in these articles that are published, Scipio Gray, this black male, is attacked for not being articulate. He's even ribbed, says you need to go to some of the free Negro schools so you can learn to articulate. Like, I've heard that before, where a black person gets accused of not being able to speak the King's English correct. Even Gus T, same lob, same accusation. But that notwithstanding, I thought, if I just wanted to go back a teaspoon, one, with at the very beginning of the book, to not miss some of the details. This is from chapter 1. This is one I'd forget if I didn't get it now. Chapter 1, Medicine's Moral Conundrum. You write, Hunter typically supplied students with their own cadaver, some of which he had obtained from a Tyburn gallows about a mile from the school. Dozens of men, women, and children were hanged there every year for any of 200 hangable offenses, including the theft of rabbits, blackening of the face at night, picking of pockets, or cutting down trees. What is the crime of blackening of the face at night that is punishable by hanging?
Well, these are really weird things, aren't they? I believed that the blackening of the face had to do with body snatching, because you'd blacken the face so you wouldn't be seen as well. And they allowed, London and throughout Europe, allowed anatomists to use criminals, the bodies of criminals who had been hanged. And now there's a lot of history behind the whole hanging thing in England that doesn't have anything to do with body snatching. But the blackening of the face, yeah, it's anybody's guess. Cutting down a tree, what's that? What are you hanging somebody for there? It was a whole different ballgame back then. It wasn't racial that I know of, although I'm not exactly a historian of England in that time, so I shouldn't say, but it doesn't strike me as being anything racist, because they were hanging everybody. And as a matter of fact, Burke and Hare were two guys that they hung Burke because they'd been killing people to get bodies to give to an anatomist. This was long after the doctor's riot, but it's now, people call it Burking. If you kill somebody to then use the body and sell the body parts, that's called Burking, from Richard Burke and Richard Hare back in merry old England.
Dr. Sean Utsi, when he visited with us, I had him in the intro, he talked with us about that term, and many of the black people had that fear as well, that we are not even going to wait for you to natural causes to run their course. Like, we need right now, so we don't have to hurry this process along. Thank you for you're giving us a little added info for blackening of the face, because I'd never heard that before. I guess I have to add that to my research for the future. You mentioned some of the really important, like I said, it's 250 years and all that, and folks who signed the Declaration, and Philadelphia, right, the nation's birthplace and such. Right. One of those folks, kind of equally important to that process and the development of the professional medical community in this part of the world, Benjamin Rush. What's his importance to this story, since his name pops up a lot? And for me, I remembered him immediately from Medical Apartheid. And is Rush a racist too?
Rush was he was not a weird character. There were a lot of complexities of the man. He was extraordinarily religious and conservatively religious, and very, very conservative, as you can imagine. But he also did a huge amount for medicine. He was a Philadelphian, of course, and he did a huge amount for medicine, including doing studies on several different diseases that really helped save an untold number of lives. But he also was a kind of a jackass, and he insisted throughout his life that bloodletting was a cure for just about everything. And even after, there was one particular physician who essentially proved that it doesn't help. There's no change whatsoever, other than it increases the mortality. It doesn't help at all any of these people that they blood. And he sued the guy. That is, Rush sued the doctor. And he won. He sued him for slander, and he won. Rush was such a powerful figure in Philadelphia and in the nascent nation as well. But that was one, like, and I thought at one point about doing a biography of him, and the more I looked into it, the more I realized, I don't even like the guy. So I didn't want to write a book about a guy I didn't like. Yeah.
Is he racist?
I would assume so. I'm not a Rush biographer or historian at all. But I think it'd be safe to assume that pretty much everybody at that time was racist, either subtly, overtly, or covertly. And as a very, very strict conservative, you can almost bet he was.
As I said, when I read your book, it reminded me of some of our guests who've been here before, and particularly Harriet A. Washington's Medical Apartheid. Have you read her book, Medical Apartheid?
No, but I'm going to. I got it written down.
Oh, okay. This is a snippet, if you'll allow me, where she talks about Benjamin Rush. I said I remembered him. She writes, so were prominent racial theorists of the day, including the Reverend Samuel Stanhope Smith and an entranced Benjamin Rush, M.D., who is now remembered as the father of American psychiatry, and who then believed that black skin was the manifestation of a type of leprosy that he called negritude. Calling blacks lepers certainly sounds like the pronouncement of an inveterate racist, and this is how Rush is sometimes regarded. However, Rush was not a racist, but a passionate abolitionist, and his views of black physiology were nuanced. Rush believed that blacks were diseased, but that they could be cured. He welcomed the various albinos, leucothophobes, probably mispronounced that, and vitiligo-stricken white Negroes as hopeful monsters, living proof that blacks could become healthily white. Cure was desirable, averred Rush, because eliminating black skin would eliminate the chief social and religious argument for enslavement, and because he believed blacks themselves preferred white skin. Rush hungered to understand and hoped to duplicate the process by which Negro skin lost its color, and he theorized that pressure and friction, violent rubbing, could banish color from the rete mucosum, the fictional skin layer. Rush never took up the scalpel against Moss, one of his slaves, to test this theory, but he cataloged the methods that other physicians had used to whiten black skin and hair, including hydrochloric acid, bleeding, they gotta get that in, purging the juice of unripe peaches, muriatic acid, and even pronounced fear. Rush did experiment with sulfuric acid on black skins, probably those of cadavers. And I'll pause there. If that is a non-racist, Jesus Christ, I do not want to...
I mean, you're looking at racism in that sense from today's lens, and I think if there were non-racist or anti-racist, I should say, back then, maybe he was it. It sounds like he might have been. I mean, there certainly were abolitionists all over the North. I didn't know that about him, that he tried these things, as his theories were. But it's, as she wrote, or he wrote, I guess it was. Or did she write? Did that from Medical Apartheid? Or
yes, sir.
Was that from?
Medical Apartheid.
She must have thought. Okay, so she must have. It was nuanced. I remember that word, and so there's some leeway in there. I think to give them maybe a benefit of a doubt as we're looking at it from 2026 versus the late 1700s.
That's. I do not agree with that. I do not agree with Harriet A. Washington on this one, and I don't even think this is presentism or viewing Rush through today's lens. At any point, if I heard any person saying that the way we eliminate racism is eliminate black people, that sounds kind of racist to me under any context. Not white people are going to stop mistreating black people. We will eliminate your blackness. What? Like, again, in my view, if that is as close as we can get to a non-racist white person, you have let me know everything I need to know about what it means to be white and the hope for a not racist white person. Matter of fact, are there any not racist white people in the book because I was looking for them, and I mean, if Rush is it, are there any other not racist white people in this story that you tell, 1788 Riot?
I tend to doubt it. The main people that I wrote about were, I'm talking about Alexander Hamilton and John Jay and Baron von Steuben, some of the military officers who tried to stop the riot. it wasn't a white or black thing. It was all right, stop, calm down, stop, trying to kill our doctors. We need them. Somebody asked me in a podcast, did I think there were any blacks in the riot? And I had to think about that for a bit, and I never came across any notations like that in all the research I did. And then I thought, well, why? Because I don't think they would have ventured out. I don't think even the free blacks would have ventured out with hundreds of angry whites, probably mostly men, some women, I'm sure. I don't think they would have ventured out.
Why?
I think it had nothing to do with cowardice or anything. I think this is my take, and I haven't looked into this, but I think they're smarter than that. They've been trying to deal with white society since they were brought over, and the behaviors that they knew was going to make the white man angry, they tended to avoid. And I suspect a similar thing happened in New York. If there were some in the crowd, I suspect they were either at the back or to one side. They kind of kept a group to themselves, and that way. But there was nothing that I found in any of the newspaper articles or other primary research I did to suggest that. And that may be because the newspaper didn't deign it important enough to write about.
That's interesting. I'll have to. Yeah. I do understand. I guess if people want to fast forward, I think the same logic would be applicable. January 6th. How many of you all would feel excited? Yes, I'm a black person and I have similar grievances. I'm going to go out and join them. I think a few of us could at least understand there might be some hesitancy if you are a black person to go out and I'm going to cheer you guys on from the sofa. Like, yes. If I can, there were so many points in this here book where I said, I hear the constant refrain that white people are ignorant about racism and white people don't think about it. And I say that is not true at all. It has never been true at any time period. White people are not allowed to be ignorant about racism. And this book, at some point, it offers fine detail that white people are very, very conscious and informed about racism. This is early in the book, chapter 1, just a little bit after the blackening of the faces at night. You write, starting in the latter half of the 1700s, the need for physicians in the colonies increased, as did the demand for cadavers. Doctors, anatomists, and sometimes even members of the lay public began offering courses on anatomy to anyone interested. Samuel Clossy, an Irish physician, taught anatomy and performed multiple dissections in America in the mid-1760s, including one on a young white woman and on a young black man. Clossy had scheduled a third dissection, but couldn't find a suitable body. He wrote, "We could not venture to meddle with a white subject, and a black or mulatto I could not procure." Physicians then were left with three choices spelled out in clear detail and by author and journalist Thomas Gallagher. They could abandon the teaching of anatomy altogether and thereby stunt the growth of American surgery. I'll stop there to give all the rest of it. But that original portion that I read right there, in terms of one, them acknowledging, and I think you've already given this point, we can't just be as reckless and careless snatching. White corpses might cause a riot. White people will take that seriously and get upset, especially about a white woman, which causes the 1788 riot. But black people and mulattoes, who cares? But if we have trouble getting them, oh man, we might have some real problems. And I note even the distinction, it's not just it's black, mulatto, even got a distinction there. We know, this one might have a white parent, even still not white. We can take this one and not cause a big hubbub. White people, that's a totally different story. I think all of this, beautiful, and I mean in a very intricate way, demonstrates that white people are very informed, conscious about racism, white supremacy, how it works, what it is. What do you think, Mr. McPhee?
Totally believe it. Absolutely. Totally agree. It has to be on the mind. It has to be on the mind. Whether they were conscious at the time of their own racist beliefs, I suspect, they knew, but it was like that's how it was. I worked with somebody in the last company I worked for, really, really smart, from Birmingham. And we got into a discussion at a table. We were all having dinner. And we got into talk about racism. And she swore, and husband were not racist. They had maids growing up, and they were our best friends. And they they went to all the family functions, and I sat there thinking, do you have any idea what you're saying? And I actually did say something, and then the conversation swerved otherwise. But it's staggering that the lack of clarity of their own actions and beliefs. And I think that happens today just as much as it happened back then. So say, well, we couldn't get a mulatto or black. Well, because nobody had died recently. That's the reason. And they couldn't get a white bar because I'm not going to upset anybody. Those are my friends. So it was a completely contradictory ethical thoughts that they had to have in their brain. Otherwise, you wouldn't have said that. But then there's no clarity. There's no self-awareness of those beliefs, or it doesn't seem to be. Why, I don't know, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
I think it's self-awareness with your friends at the dinner table, or it sounds like you spoiled the main course. Maybe you didn't get dessert that night, didn't get asked back either. But I think there is a lot just in terms of this is how we see. And yeah, that so-called friend, the maid, the help, if you, and I think they say that in Catherine Stockett's book, the fiction, The Help. I think they say some of the same things, that she was a family member and a friend. They perpetuate that lie. I'm sorry?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's what
I thought. That's exactly what I thought of.
Right.
The Help.
Right. Exactly. And did they get benefits or a vacation or we needed our family friend. We didn't have she meant too much to us to give a vacation or health benefits or anything like that. Come on. The layers of racism. You also, this is a little bit later in the book, and this just to me in terms of white people are not ignorant. They are dedicated to white supremacy racism. And you write, this is in chapter 7, where we're getting closer to the riot. You write the resurrectionists would monitor cemeteries for burials which generally occurred during the day. Potter's Field and black burial grounds proved easiest to plunder. Relatives were too poor to pay a watchman to guard the grave, and coffins were usually built of inexpensive wood, making them a cinch to break open. Rural church cemeteries made excellent targets as well, but if the resurrectionists, whether professional, physician, or student, were desperate enough, any cemetery or burial spot would work just fine. Experienced resurrectionists built a network of grave diggers, undertakers, and physicians who would alert them of impending burials. That stood out to me just because you include some of this in your book. And Dr. Utsi told us about this as well, that a lot of these white doctors or medical students, they would depend on a black person. That would be their resurrectionist who would go out and snatch these bodies up and bring them back so that the white students could learn medicine, anatomy, all the rest of it. To have a network of people, spies, if you will. We talk so much about that of late, about white people having spies on black people. I mean, wow, this is a whole nother network of spies that we're going to watch the graveyard to see when we can go get a fresh corpse. I'm sorry?
It was a business. The physicians were involved, not so much medical students, they were free, but the physicians, the anatomists were involved. they had resurrectionists who knew them, and so there were instances of physicians telling a resurrectionist, keep your eyes peeled for a young woman or child, because I need to teach them about that kind of a body as well. And they would pay them a little more for those. So there was a network of this, and these networks are still around. Not of resurrectionists, but it's different now, and we'll get to that, I'm sure, later. I hope so. Modern body snatching. There's still a system where funeral homes feed body parts to tissue banks on the sly, and the tissue banks sell body parts on the quite open market. But yeah, you're right. There was a whole system, and it hasn't changed a whole lot. They're not looking they're not out looking at cemeteries. I know what I was going to say. If anyone is in New York or gets to New York and goes to the African Burial Ground National Monument, there are charts of the section of graves that they were able to recover, stacked on top of each other in all different directions. Some had no coffin at all. Some had only the scantest wood, not balsa wood, but a little bit stronger than that. And that was only if their master, if they were enslaved, it was if their master bought it for them or made it for them. It was very easy to go to the Negro's burial ground, look for a spot that was had fresh dirt, dig up the body, because you wanted those fresh bodies, the fresh cadavers, before they started to decompose. That's always been the case until we had the Civil War, when embalming first came up. And once we were able to embalm people, and certainly once refrigeration came in, there's no more need for the traditional resurrectionist. So yeah, you kept your eyes peeled. Wherever there was a body buried during the day, that night you could bet there would be resurrectionists trying to get that body. And some graveyards, including Scipio Gray's churchyard or graveyard next to his house, posted guards all night to protect the bodies from disruption. It gives me the willies just to think about it even now. And I wrote the book. But yeah, it was terrible.
Context of White Supremacy. That I highlighted. I even switched my highlighter color. You had told us about A Friend of Decency, this newspaper exchange where they're talking about the looting of black graves. That's right. Even included in the exchange that black people began placing armed guards in the cemeteries to ward off people from stealing their relatives' corpses and such. And this, again, we've been talking about armed resistance to racism quite a bit over the last couple of months. That is, one, that lets you know how much of a problem this is. This has gotten to a point where we have to keep armed guards at the burial site for protection. Two, yet another refutation, the notion that black people are cowards and haven't done anything, and white people just come and practice racism and smack us around and we don't respond. Totally false. Even black people, and this is like it's almost 300 years ago, black people coming and saying, no, you are not going to loot our loved ones and snatch them up for your white doctors to learn all of this and have no response. Even you talked about writing letters. They even tried both tactics. Will be professional, courteous, try to go through proper channels, as they say, or any means necessary. We will be out here and have sentinels guarding the cemetery to make sure. Like, that is super, and just speaks to the gravity of the problem. I can't emphasize that enough. Before I get
there's even another level, and you mentioned it before about the man in Virginia who was stealing bodies.
Oh yeah, Chris Baker. Sorry, Chris Baker.
Yes. So they were beginning to run out of bodies. So this is in the 1800s. Beginning to run out of bodies that they could obtain readily. So the University of Georgia, which had not been open very long, they opened a medical school, and they were buying corpses from New York because they had a lot of people. Of course, people in New York with such a concentration of individuals. There were a lot of contagious diseases spreading around, and a lot of people died. A greater number of people died in New York because there was a greater population. So they would buy them, and they'd haul, and they hired this one guy at the University of Georgia, Grandison Harris, and they hired Grandison to go up and get bodies and bring them back down. And they wound up bringing him on full time as supposedly basically a maintenance worker. But there was a local graveyard. There were several that he pilfered, but they hired him to do that. They hired him as their own medical college's resurrectionist. And he's pictured, I have it in the book, in a graduating class at the University of Georgia, and he's way up in the back on the right-hand side, smiling as big as he can, because he was getting paid, and he did very well. He wound up being buried in the same cemetery he was using to dig up bodies for the medical school. So the white supremacists are like, yeah, we'll get a black guy to do our dirty work. It's cheaper that way. And the students didn't have to do it. Yeah.
Harriet A. Washington talks about that pattern as what Dr. Sean Utsi, where you mentioned Chris Baker in Virginia, talks about this was a widespread pattern in terms of the division of labor, where the white doctors, white medical students, hey, we got our white lab coat on. We can't be out in the dirt digging up. That's unsightly. Yeah. We get a black person. Sometimes we get a black slave to go and do this work. In fact, that passage where you talk about Mr. Harrison, that's chapter 13. I highlighted that one too. You write, medical schools in states with lower populations began looking to higher population areas for cadavers. New York proved a most prolific source. Schools in New England, Connecticut purchased many bodies from New York at a great expense of money and great hazard of being discovered, end quote. The Medical College of Georgia hired freelance resurrection men to import bodies from New York. Between 1848 and 1852, 64 bodies were purchased in New York and transported to Augusta in old whiskey barrels. Faculty at the school dedicated in 1852 to bring resurrection duties in-house and purchased for $700 a tall, strapping man named Grandison Harris. His duties at the college were officially listed as janitor and porter, but his actual duty was to procure bodies for the anatomy lab. Late at night, Harris would sneak into the Cedar Grove Cemetery a few blocks south of the college. Oh, that is such... I need to back up and read that again because that's Harriet A. Washington. Late at night, Harris would sneak into the Cedar Grove Cemetery a few blocks south of the college and fetch recently interred bodies. The cemetery housed the bodies of black citizens only, most of whom had been buried in wood coffins or simply wrapped in cloth and interred in unmarked graves. Harris proved untouchable as a resurrectionist. He couldn't be arrested for his trade because he was a slave. And now, if he had been doing this to a white body, I'm sure white people would have found a way to punish he or his white owners. But that notwithstanding, because his employers were some of the most eminent men in town, they too were safe from prosecution. Of course, if someone raised a ruckus, Harris would have been conveniently put forth as the culprit. After Harris died in 1911 at around age 90, which is startling, he was buried in the same graveyard he once plundered. I'm surprised they didn't put his skeleton on display. I thought that was staggering, and I can't say enough. That first portion of the second paragraph, where the Cedar Grove Cemetery is just a few blocks from the college, Harriet A. Washington has an extensive section where she talks about white medical colleges like this being deliberately located in close proximity to black populations. Got to get them bodies to study. And she starts with John Hopkins in Maryland, goes right down the line. Have you seen evidence of this sort of correlation? Black medical college or the white medical college is going to be literally blocks from where they can go get a black source of bodies?
I have not. No. Nope. Never even thought of it. Wow. Because my thought is like the college is there. Mm. The medical college came along. Like once there's an upper level, a college or a university, whatever they do, medical schools came along once they had enough people to train who could then train people on their own. So medical schools didn't really start popping up everywhere until the early 1800s, 1810, 1820, up to 1850. And the growth in medical schools at that time was enormous. I never looked at the placement, however, and correlated that the placement of the colleges with cemeteries. But I suspect you are right more often than not, depending on the college.
Let me pull again. I love Harriet A. Washington, top 3. This is right next to where she talks about the black slaves praying that they die in the summertime to avoid all of this. Yeah. Chapter 5, she writes, Northern medical schools also employed strategies to make the most of the black and poor white populations they had. For example, on February 20, 1810, Dr. John Warren and Professor of Chemistry Aaron Dexter presented the President and Fellows of Harvard University with a memorial and petition for the removal of medical lectures to Boston, in which they made their case for moving Harvard Medical School from the university's home base in Cambridge across the Charles River to Boston, where it could avail itself of cadavers from the poor black and white denizens of the almshouse. Warren successfully argued that one of the great objects of the school was to offer students cadavers for dissection, without which Harvard might be eclipsed by other medical establishments, even in the remote areas of the country. Later that year, the medical school moved to Boston. The great Harriet A. Washington. Dr. Sean Utsi, he says the exact same thing. John Hopkins, Maryland, high population of black. And matter of fact, that's with Henrietta Lacks. That was talked about right there, that black people lived in fear. And they even had some of the same fears that these white people are so greedy for bodies, they might not wait for natural causes to take their course. Whoops, we had an accident. Leroy didn't make it. Get his body. Like, man, they said generations of black people in Maryland, that's what they thought about with white doctors, not Nurse Rivers and Tuskegee. They're going to kill us and do God knows what with our body.
Yeah.
I guess with the riot, because that is important, and then even the lack of regulation, because that's at the end of the book, and that's Sade Robinson doesn't have a skull. That is very important. But with I guess even I did just mention Baltimore. Let me see if I can go get that spot as well, because you did reference Baltimore in your text. But with the riot on page, and you do have the picture I will include. If folks get a picture, you can see Mr. Grandison Harris, you can see him in the back. I had to take a moment because I think I might have missed him if I hadn't enlarged it greatly, but that is, always love a great picture. On 258, you're talking about this riot and making a point that the 1788 doctors' riot, that this was about the theft of a white woman's body. This was not, we're outraged about the black cemetery being plundered or black people's concerns in the newspapers. This is a white woman. Now we're upset and we're going to go do something about this and make laws. You said that, and you even touch on this explicitly, that two opposing factions were now lined up within inches of one another, one determined to punish the people inside and the other equally determined to prevent it. The fury driving the mob stemmed almost exclusively from the theft of white bodies from churchyards reserved for white parishioners. No fusses from the non-black citizenry had arisen before this, when black bodies had been taken from the Negro burial grounds. No fusses had come from the theft of bodies of the poor, indigent, and imprisoned in the city's Potter's Field. It was only after the white New Yorkers realized that bodies of their own kind had been taken that protests had started. That I thought, and even talking about whether or not some of the... Oh, wait a minute, let me read this. You write about that, whether some non-white people participated. Let me just include this so folks can think on it. You say whether there were black rioters among the throng has never been determined for certain. New York historian Robert Swan has outlined his reason for believing that at least some black citizens took part in the mob, writing, Chief Justice Richard Morris implied that the mob comprised all ranks of society from the vulgar to those of refined sensibilities. Certainly, blacks, many who were light-complexioned and could pass for white, were interspersed within this throng. 3 were arrested but cannot be identified. Between 3 and 6 deaths were reported. 2 were described as only a cartman, I don't know what that means, and a young man. 1 black death occurred, that of a boy slave attending his master, William S. Livingston, who was defending the jailhouse.
The jailhouse.
Jailhouse, thank you. Importantly, the riot began on Sunday afternoon. A mob of this size on the Sabbath probably did not emanate from the workplace, but more likely from the church congregations, perhaps instigated by and including ministers still intoxicated with revolutionary fervor. So, I don't know, maybe some thought maybe there could have been a few black people, mulattoes as they say, dispersed in. They certainly would have had a grievance, but I can certainly understand your logic about, this would have kind of been a dangerous.
Yeah, that's my take on it. I mean, I didn't get into it, but that was kind of my take. It's like, well, okay, light-skinned blacks, okay, I can see that, but I can't see any darker skin. I'm not sure. But again, I don't think there's any way to tell for certain with the documentation at the time.
It would be dangerous. I would certainly have thoughts, even for when they bring in the troops to put this all down. Danger from lots of different sides being in this sort of environment. Baltimore did come up. I found that one a little bit later. You write in chapter 12, Baltimore became the site of another anatomy riot, this time in late 1807 when a mob attacked a building called Anatomy Hall. The building, located at the corner of Liberty and Saratoga Streets, had been specially built by a physician named John B. Davidge to teach anatomy through lectures and dissections. A week after Davidge's first class, a mob attacked the building and burned it down. Was this, do you think, in relation to finding out about a white body, or do you know any of the racial components of this mob? Mob in Baltimore?
I don't, but I suspect it was the same thing. There were anatomy riots pretty much wherever there was a medical school, from starting with the New York riot. There was a riot. There were anatomy riots in New England. Those would not have been black bodies being taken, just bodies, white bodies that people didn't like not being told that their loved one was being disinterred and dissected. That didn't go over well. So it wasn't in every case a racial issue at all. It was taking bodies for anatomy, and that certainly was the case. There was a big one in Vermont. There was another one in a couple of Massachusetts, ranging down to St. Louis, into the Midwest and Ohio. So they were pretty much wherever a medical school opened, there was a riot against those students and anatomists who were doing it. I mean, they just got used to it. They came to believe that it was part of learning anatomy, is dealing with people at the door wanting to break into the lab and break all the equipment, which is what happened in New York. Which many times they were talked out of it. It wasn't as an aggressive protest group, but all over the place they happened. and including, as you say, in Baltimore, there was quite a strong one, and they burned the building down.
Years before Freddie Gray, man, President Trump said, "I told you, Boston's been a hellhole. I told you." See. Mr. Andy McPhee, author of the Doctors' Riot of 1788, Context of White Supremacy. You had mentioned repeatedly that this is ongoing. You said consistently that the networks, in terms of going to steal these bodies and or body parts and such and trading in all of this, that this continues. You write in the book that the traffic in these parts and such is kind of unregulated. Even we're talking right now 2026. This is kind of towards the tail end of the book in chapter 13, where you write, illegally sourced body parts have also found their way into the oddities trade. Oddities are unusual and often macabre items such as crystals, bug art, taxidermy specimens, pagan items, and animal and human bones. Oddities markets are held throughout the nation and resemble country flea markets. Many oddities dealers today use social media to advertise their wares, which is how an Arkansas woman named Candace Scott found a heavily tattooed Pennsylvania man with metal spikes embedded in his head. Jeremy Pauley, an oddities dealer near Scranton, described himself as a curator to the historic remains and artifacts. Scott came across a Facebook post by Pauley, and the two soon set up a business arrangement. Scott worked at a funeral home in Little Rock that often received bodies from the Medical Sciences and Anatomical Gift Program at the University of Arkansas. She collected body parts and then, over a 9-month period, sold to Jeremy Pauley 24 boxes of human remains, including several lungs, hearts, breasts, and testicles, as well as a brain, a skull, an ear, an arm, a belly button, and 2 whole stillborn infants. Pauley used the payment application PayPal to send Scott $10,625 for all boxes. I think he talked about that as well. Like, you can sell a whole body for whatever X amount of dollars, but if you start chopping it up and, hey, we got teeth here and testicles, woo, you can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Pauley turned around and sold one of the infants to a Minnesota man named Matthew Lampy, who later was sentenced to 15 months in prison for obtaining and transporting human remains across state lines. Pauley pleaded guilty to state charges of abuse to a corpse and to federal charges of conspiracy and interstate transportation of stolen property. Now, I put this in context. One, Sade C. Robinson, I played that at the beginning. She Has No Skull. Jeffrey Dahmer, collection of all of these body parts, and the macabre celebration of Dahmer, where you get all these movies and people. In fact, they had to put in measures to make sure that people didn't do that. We got the last shirt that Dahmer wore, and we got this from his apartment, and they had to put in all these measures because they knew this was murderabilia. They got whole terms for this. I also put this in context of the long, undeniable white history of lynching black bodies. We're not going to put you in a medical institution. We're going to put your fingers in a jar in grandpa's attic or on our mantelpiece. We'll put your testicles, like they mentioned, get your testicles, put them in a jar and keep that in the house for the next 50, 60 years. We've had white people tell us about, man, my grandfather died. We had a black person's finger in the attic. I don't even know what to do with it. Long history of white conduct of this sort of thing. And even Kendrick Johnson, black male we mentioned Georgia, black male who died suspiciously in a gym mat in Georgia. They go to do the autopsy, and then, wait a minute, his organs are missing, and his body has been stuffed with newspapers. CNN reported this. This was not some wacky conspiracy.
Yeah.
CNN in Georgia with Mr. Kendrick Johnson. That's the context that I read all of this and how the racism white supremacy continues with this, what they'll call black market organ trade, body parts trading, all of that. I guess, can you speak, because this was a really important ending to the book.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you remember, there was a gentleman, oh God, now I'm not going to think of his name, he did Masterpiece Theater for a long, long time. Andy, what was his name? I'm blanking. I'm getting old, you know.
Me too. Let's see.
And so he died at 94, 96 or something. And he went to a funeral home. And the funeral home took his long bones, the femur, and the bones of the lower leg, and replaced them with PVC pipes. And they took other items from his body that the daughter, who was the only surviving heir, wasn't aware of. And they sold those parts to legitimate tissue banks. So there's a legitimate tissue bank market, and I try to call them body tissues, or body parts, I should say. But that's what tissue banks are. Tissue bank is a much softer term. But they take pieces of the body and then distribute them to medical schools, the military, medical conferences. Because surgeons need to practice. Orthodontists need to practice on new procedures and such. And so it's not uncommon for a conference for orthopedic surgeons, let's say, to purchase 20 shoulders or 15 knees. And they use those shoulders or knees in the conference to practice and learn on an actual body part, a new procedure. Orthodontists, orthopedic, the dental surgeons will use a jaw and to learn new procedures. The military will use torsos to see how bullets react, or new weapons and how they react. Automobile manufacturers, it's been known, we've known this for a long time, they use bodies in crashes. Now they use crash test dummies. So they're not using the whole body now so much as they are heads, knees, and see how the front of the car buckles. So body parts are an integral part of medical education today and testing of products. Integral. Where do you get them? You think you're getting them from people whose loved ones have died and they've given their body to science. Which, by the way, giving your body to science is not, nobody's studying a cadaver to learn about how to treat a disease. Nobody. Those days are gone. When you donate a body to science, you're giving it to a tissue bank of some kind, a body part distribution company, and they distribute limbs and such across state lines if need be. Internationally, there's a conference in, I want to say California, that ordered a bunch of, no, I'm sorry, there was a company, an institution in Australia that ordered a bunch of body parts from a company in the US, and they shipped them overseas. That's kind of stuff is going on. Now, I'm in complete favor of that. We have to learn. I want a surgeon who's already tried working on the shoulder, that new procedure, before he tries it on me. The difference is, and you touched on it in the very beginning, was one of the snippets, consent. That's what's missing in a lot of places. So the people I talked with, I asked them, so what advice, what should I tell people who are reading this and don't want their loved one's body to end up crossing the state line, or they don't want to give up their heart, or they don't want to give up any of their bones, or whatever. What do you tell them? I said, well, they all agreed. This is like buying a house. Do your due diligence. So if you're going to donate your body to science, check out where you're going to donate it. Is it a university? Is it a private company? Ask every question you can think of and make sure they answer each honestly and clearly. You should be able to see the premises. You should be able to see the labs. You should be able to say, listen, I don't want my loved one traveling across states, or I don't want them leaving the country, or I prefer it if you didn't take this organ or that organ, whatever the case may be. And of course, I have more details in the book. I realize we're short on time, but this is a major multi-million-dollar market. And universities are not immune. One of the most recent examples of a body part problem was in a University of North Texas Health Science Center at Fort Worth. And one of the people in the medical morgue there was selling body parts. And they got caught and were sanctioned. They had to close the program down. I think it's back open. I'm not sure. Harvard University, the medical school of Harvard, had the very most recent one that I've heard of. The morgue manager was a guy named Cedric Lodge. And he and his wife were selling body parts from the morgue to tissue banks, so to speak, but they really were undercover people, and he would get those from there were morgues outside who were sort of supplying him. But in any case, he was only sentenced earlier this spring. He finally was sentenced, and he wound up being, I think, 2 or 3 years in jail. That's how recent this is, and that's how prevalent this is. We're talking University of Texas, North Texas. We're talking about Harvard University. These are well-known universities and certainly well-known medical schools. So you have to do your due diligence. It happens. They finally gave ashes back to the host of Masterpiece Theater. I still haven't
Alistair Cook. We got it.
Thank you, Alistair Cook. Thank you. I loved him too. He was fabulous. Great voice. Very silky. Very nice voice. They finally gave his ashes back to the daughter, and she has no idea if those are his ashes or ashes, whatever that they got from the funeral home. Could have been anybody's. There's no way to tell. So body snatching is still going on today. I call it modern body snatching. It's a different ball game, but in many ways it's very much the same. I don't know how much racism is involved in that. If that's your next question, I don't know, because we don't know how many body parts are sold. We don't know the main places that they're being sold from or to, because there's no regulation. There are no statistics because there's no regulation. There's no body like an association or an institution. There's no society that maintains those kinds of statistics. It is almost completely unregulated. And I talked with a physician here in Florida. He's been after the government, trying to get the government to make laws to start regulate this industry for more than a decade.
Wow.
And nothing has happened. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on now. I don't think it's going to happen right now, but it's something absolutely needs to happen.
Context of White Supremacy. Again, Sade C. Robinson. Where is her skull? Question mark. And then, in terms of the racism with all of this now, it has some striking similarities to Chris Baker and Grandison Harris that you wrote about in The Doctor's Riot of 1788 with Mr. Lodge. He's a black male, unless I have been mistaken or what have you. This is
No, he is.
Okay.
Yep.
This is the medical personnel at Harvard who's he was in charge of the morgue, who you just said got sentenced just a few weeks back. That is very much like the Resurrectionists, where they would get this strapping Grandison Harris. He'll be the ball person, and he'll be the only one who will be going to prison and criminally charged and all of this, convicted. Everybody else, and you said we don't even know the scale. Like how many, whose body?
No idea. Yes, right.
Very similar. Things haven't changed that much in 200 50 years or so. With Grandison Harrison specifically, you described him as strapping. What did you mean by strapping?
A big hulking guy. I pictured that was. I don't know if that was a word that was used in one of the newspaper articles. I'd have to go back and look. They might have said it's a big strong man, and I just used strapping as a big strong guy. That's all.
I see.
What does it mean, other than what I'm thinking it means?
Strapping. Well, I will say it does have a very plantational connotation to me. Just I think of the lash, right? That would come to mind. But beyond all that,
no, not meant that way.
I mean, but it would be accurate. It would be totally accurate.
Yeah.
Let's see, strapping. Strapping. I mean, you did use the term, and you've given us your definition already, but big and strong, that's the easy one.
Yeah.
He had 3 strapping sons. That's just one of those terms I pay attention to because it does have that kind of plantational and even strapping in terms of that's the way we want to describe an expensive slave. He costs a lot of money because he is robust, strapping Negro. It has a very plantational feel to me. Beyond all that, and I pay attention to word choices as well. One of the other words that popped up in the text I wanted to make sure that I inquired about. This is chapter 11, hunting for the the cursed dissectors. You write, a third group of militia arrived at the prison around dusk. As they made their way along, the crowd hissed and jeered, niggling the men with taunts and threats. Tensions surged, anger turned to fury, and the mob's behavior bordered on hysteria. Continued violence seemed assured. Niggling the men. That's even one I don't even hear too much.
That's in a quote.
I don't see any quotes here, sir. I'm at the end of chapter 13. No quotes.
Hang on.
A third group, the last paragraph of chapter 11, last paragraph.
Oh, God. You're right. I apologize. Yep.
No problem. Just what did you mean by niggling there?
Just that's a good question. I think poking at them and criticizing them and that kind of thing. Let me. Oh, I feel horrible.
Why?
Because I don't like to use that stuff. Something slight, persistent, and bothersome. Low-level pain, often a small detail, a minor complaint. Well, it doesn't even fit. And I'm a word guy. I don't like that. No, Well, I apologize.
I didn't. No apology needed, Mr. McPhee.
No, it does.
Why do you feel that you need to?
Because I don't. This is the second word. The strapping one, I understand, but it's frequently used as a descriptor
for sure
for big strong men.
For sure.
Niggling, I don't know why I even use that. I don't know.
It's accurate. I mean, it fits. I just want to be correct for listeners. I was not seeking an apology.
Yes.
I didn't think.
No, I know that.
I just wanted to,
I try to consider myself an anti-racist. I've read about that. I only recently, but I try to act in that way. So that kind of bothers me. Despite phonetic similarities, is entirely unrelated to racial slurs, originating instead in the 17th century Scandinavian roots, meaning to do things ineffectively or fuss over trifles. Well, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit my own book. So I had a completely different definition in my head when I wrote it, and I don't know what it was.
Oh, what definition did you have in your head for niggling?
I don't know. I had to be like what I'm doing now. You can't see me, but I'm got my hands out, and it's like I've got a little pokey stick, and I'm like poking you like that. That's in my head. That's what it was, kind of getting after them. I'm going to tear you up, and I'm going to get at you. I don't know. You can't see my face, but I'm trying to get the right voice. That kind of thing. That was in my head, I believe.
Okay. I think doesn't that slight but persistent annoyance? That does fit.
Yeah, I guess.
For me, that's one that I do. I think you read where they said, despite the phonetic similarity, it's not related to racism. I just say now, if you call people that are classified as black nigras, who are an annoyance and they cause us anxiety, and then you come and say that as an adjective, things that cause us a slight but persistent annoyance or discomfort, that sounds just like them dark people that you say. Like,
Yes, I hear you. Believe me. Oh.
Anywho, thank you for entertaining. Because I don't hear that word used very frequently, and that might be the reason. That might be the reason. But I don't hear that word used very, very frequently. I do always give an eyebrow written niggling. Yeah. Interesting. All righty. Yeah. What would you replace it with? Now that you've thought about it, if you swapped it, what would you swap it with?
Cheered. I think I might say taunting and threatening. So I've just recast that whole last part of the sentence.
Okay. Taunting.
I wouldn't use that at all. Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate the honesty, Mr. McPhee. I too pay attention to words; they are very important.
Yes,
I wanted to, and I don't have any expertise with regards to healthcare, nursing, none of the above, anatomy, embalming, none of that. I thought there is a rich history, not just of medicine on the continent of Africa, but embalming and the ways that they dealt with deceased and corpses and all of that. You spent a lot of time talking about the white history of dealing with death and anatomy and all of that. There is no inclusion of how non-white people have dealt with this science of death and dying. And that seemed interesting because it might have been an interesting comparison in terms of, did they have the same ethical problems, or did they handle all this in a different manner?
Well, I talked about the burial rights, not rights, but when I was talking about, I think it was building a nation. Is that what this chapter was? I talked about the jewelry that people were buried with, and the shrouds people use. I talked a fair amount about the free blacks in New York City and how the culture came to be in New York City, how close they were and they arrived from all over New England, from the South. I can't remember exactly where it was, but I know I did.
Chapter 8, Building a Nation?
I don't know.
Let me read a little bit. In Western Africa, only kings were buried in coffins. Ordinary people were buried wrapped in a mat or shroud. Coffins became used more often for commoners throughout the African diaspora during the 18th century, even as so many male adults were buried without a coffin in the area comprising the African burial ground. Fully 75% of male bodies had been buried without a coffin. Is that the portion you were thinking, or something?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, yes.
Okay. Yes, you have that there, but I mean, that is very short shrift, and it really doesn't even get into like the medical component, because I mean, you give a lot of, you have pictures and the rooms where they would do the dissections and invite the public. You have lots of that for the white, and even go into detail in Europe. It's not like for the continent at all. And I mean, they have to have had a very rich history of this practice there that I suspect might differ substantially from the way that white people carried out this business.
Unquestionably, I was going from the standpoint of, where did the doctors, the people who were in the U.S., the people involved in that right, where did they learn medicine? They learned it from Europe. They didn't learn it from Africa. They learned it from, as I say, Edinburgh and London and Paris, and there's a place in Belgium. Padua in Italy is another place. Although mostly for the America, the early doctors, Edinburgh and London. That's where they learned. Edinburgh was a center of medicine at that time. So yeah, I'm sure they were different. I didn't write, and I consciously didn't write about China either, because it wasn't pertinent to the physicians and the history of what happened in New York, 1788. You see, you always have a difficult time deciding what to write and what not to include. That's probably the most difficult part of writing any book, any nonfiction book, is what don't you include. And actually, it's one of my faults, because as I'm writing, I have a grave tendency to shoot graves. See what I did there? I have a grave tendency to shoot off into splinter. I splinter, and because that's really interesting. I'm going to talk about that, and that's really interesting too. I'm going to talk about that, and then after a while, I'm like, wait, I'm so far off base now, it isn't funny. So I hold off on that information and get back to the point of the chapter, and so yeah, it's very difficult not to include things that I wish I did or could have. But
understood. And it's detailed, lots of information in the book. I learned a lot. It did in my brain computer. This is, I suspect, not the only way of handling dissections and even how to teach the next crop of medical students or anatomists or whatever it's going to be. And I suspect just a quick inclusion of that might further offset that there is another way that this could have been done with respect for the family, and people have consent and say so, and this is how people did this in other parts of the world beyond just white people. I think that might have been informative for listeners.
Good
but
point.
Yes, Bahram, you got limits. You can't put everything in a book. I guess before we let you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday evening, I was talking about some of the snippets. I like sometimes to see what the bot says about a summary for the book, and the bot said for a summary, the historical data shows that white society had absolutely zero moral issue with grave robbing, or it should be body snatching because grave robbing is different, with body snatching for months, years, and decades, as long as the slicing was restricted to the Negro's burial ground. Isn't it historically accurate to state that your book, The Doctor's Riot of 1788, isn't actually about a sudden moral awakening regarding body snatching, but rather a violent enforcement of white supremacy's racial boundaries once elite white graves were targeted?
Oh, without question. Without question. The morality of it has always been, until it was basically fixed with embalming and refrigeration. Always before that, okay, well, we've got to learn how to do this stuff. How are we going to learn? Well, the white supremacy part is, well, the blacks, the Negroes, we'll just take them. They don't really count. They're only a third of a person anyway. And even that was a compromise, as you know. Or we'll take the poor people, or anybody who hasn't claimed the body, we'll take that body, and we'll take any criminal who's been hanged or otherwise killed. And we'll take those are okay. Don't be taking a white woman, a white man, a white child from us. We don't cotton to that. So yeah, white supremacy is absolutely behind it. White supremacy has been around a long ass time. And it's been that same feeling, that same ethos has been directed not just at the black community, but now you're seeing it to an extent in the Hispanics. You see it to Asian people. You see anybody who doesn't look like a white people think they should look. Anybody who's different. They're less in the minds of the white supremacists. I'm preaching to the choir here, but yeah, it's absolutely behind it. Sure, there's a racial element, absolutely, to body snatching, and there has been from the beginning.
Much obliged. Bot was accurate on that one. I thought so as well. If I'd read the book again, this was just published this year. Yes, 2026.
Yeah, in the end of January. Yep.
Wow.
It's in audio format as well as Kindle, and the audio, the narrator is just terrific. Christopher Wise did a fantastic job. He's so listenable. I've listened to books, as I'm sure you have, with the narrators like, "Oh, please kill me now, put me to sleep." This guy's fantastic. So there's an audio version, a Kindle version, and the hardcover version.
Okay, right on.
Available
folks,
wherever books are sold.
can check if you need brand new nonfiction nonfiction, all about racism, white supremacy, the Doctors' Riot of 1788, Body Snatching, Bloodletting, and Anatomy in America. Right on time for two. Have you had any DEI problems? People say, "Hey, man, you got all this about racism in here and all the like. We don't want to cause no problems."
No, that's why I was so anxious to talk with you. No, nothing. It's just really been about a book. People want to know about different aspects. Some really interested, like you are, in the body snatching part of it. Others a little more in the history of it. But no, this has been a terrific eye-opening for me, certainly, and I hope it's been helpful to you in some way and enjoyable.
Learned quite a bit. Thank you for letting us niggle you a bit for your Tuesday evening, Mr. McPhee. Retired critical nurse, my first time, I think, even talking to a critical care nurse, retired, my first time even talking to such a person. I learned a ton. Third time was the charm indeed. We will be on the lookout. You've written so much. If you do anything else related to racism, let me know. I will be first in line to read.
All right. I will indeed. I will definitely do that. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Pleasure was ours. Again, our guest, Mr. Andy McPhee, the Doctors' Riot of 1788. Enjoy the rest of your evening and good luck promoting the brand new book, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Take care. You too. Context of White Supremacy. I thought of Dr. Welsing. Should have mentioned her name probably earlier, medical doctor, and she would have, I bet, loved this book. I can't believe that I had even extra time because I got sick. We were supposed to do this program like a week ago, this past Sunday, but I got sick suddenly too. I was all I had finished the book. I'd read the whole thing before Sunday even, had my notes and all that good stuff. I was going to take my time to get, my intro together and make sure I get some Harriet A. Washington in there and Sade Robinson, put things in proper context. And man, I thought I was going to have to go to I told him, I said, man, the body snatchers might be coming to get me. And it was like sudden onset. I felt awful, and increasingly awful. It was like as the day went on, I just got worse and worse and worse. Jesus Christ. Anyway, I'm so glad we were able to finally get that. I would have been furious if we had missed out on that because of my poor health, and particularly Dr. Welsing, medical doctor. I know, but Baltimore, she was so interested in the case of Henrietta Lacks. Baltimore, Johns Hopkins, I just mentioned them, where they have white medical colleges that are in close proximity to regions with large populations of black people. Why? We need experiments. Subject, we got to study the Negro. Henrietta Lacks, Rebecca Skloot. We had Henrietta Lacks' grandson, Ron Lacks, as a guest on the program to talk about his book about his grandmother. But Dr. Welsing, I know she would have been interested in this book. Current meaning and significance with regards to the lack of regulation and going out and stealing body parts and all of that continues. Sade Robinson, where is her skull? Jeff Dahmer, I know Dr. Welsing was super interested in that. And as a medical doctor, I'm sure Kendrick Johnson, she was with us when that happened. Where is organs? I am sure she would have been interested in a text like this. Anywho, man, I'm so glad we did not miss out today or yesterday. We compensated for both. Now get back on the grind, even though I think I was in error yesterday when we had our guest, my memory slipped, our white guest on the program yesterday. We talked about his white lie. Oh, that's Greg Garrett. That's it. Racist suspect. Greg Garrett. I'm glad we did not miss either. I would have been furious if my illness had caused us to miss out. I think with Mr. Garrett yesterday, I told him I was about 90% back. I think that was probably wishful. I think yesterday I was probably about 85%. Say today, maybe 90%. Maybe. I was still very tired. This is more talking the last 2 days than I've done since I've been sick. talking takes a lot of energy, especially when you are congested. Man, it takes a lot of energy, and especially I'd say talking to people classified as white. Any hoodles. Take a quick break, and then we'll get right back to it. Give out the schedule for the rest of the week, and hopefully as I can get my health back, we'll get updates on Sade Robinson as well. But Context of White Supremacy. 1 sec, and we'll be right back.
Got another term on there, VGQ. What does that mean? Victims Guaranteed Qualification. Now, that keeps you from getting into arguments with other black people, particularly on television, which I get sick of that. Black people shouting. You know, we get into our ghetto thing once we get on television and get wound up. And we start all yelling at once. And the racists sit there smugly and just look. They watch the tennis match, so to speak. Right? And black people are shouting each other down, talking about, you don't know what you're talking about, and so and so and so and so, and we go into our Amos and Andy and Sapphire Act. Okay? VGQ means Victims Guaranteed Qualification. Guaranteed qualification to do what? To give your opinion on anything about race. Don't care what it is. If you're on there with Minister Farrakhan, or you're on there with Mike Tyson, or you're on there with Miss, what's her name, Williams, the lady that had him put in, recommended that he be put in jail, or you're on there with anybody. So you don't cut the other black person down. Now, I don't even like that term brother and sister, even though it's been around for about 30 years. But I ain't going to talk about the brother here, no. See, we haven't reached that stage where we can do that. See, we got to crawl before we walk, but we don't miss any steps. Don't say you are what you're not. Don't say you feel something that you don't really feel. You don't really feel that he's a brother. I usually use the expression, I don't like anybody in here. I say that to all audiences. I haven't been taught to like anybody. I've been taught to dislike people. I've been taught that. Right. And then they're taught to dislike me, so it's just compounded disliking. I haven't even got to love yet. All right? So what we do is minimize conflict, try not to hurt each other. So a certain thing, that's what a code is for. It's a stopgap. It keeps me from saying something against you. You say, well, don't you agree with what this person just said down here on the other end and whatnot? That person has VGQ, Mr. Donahue. I keep using him because he's one of the most prominent TV people. Right? But the main thing you do is try to stay off of a radio program or TV program or even a neighborhood stage program, you might say, where you spend your time shouting back and forth at other black people. Nothing is getting done there. And when it's done on television, a lot of black people just get up from the TV set and go on in the kitchen somewhere once that shouting starts. Yeah, they get disgusted. They say, oh, here we go. They started off okay, but now they're doing a job on each other, and I don't even want to hear it. So just don't do it. And you cut it off. The cutoff point is that person has Victims Guaranteed Qualification. You spell it out what it means. Meaning the person can say anything about race that they want to, and I can say anything about it that I want to. You are guaranteed that. You earn that as a victim. Simply by being a victim. Now, if a white person says something, that's something else.
That is what the Context of White Supremacy is all about. If someone classified as white says something, hey, all bets are off, metaphor. Feel free to critique, scrutinize, evaluate as long as you see fit. Context of White Supremacy. We should be here. Gus T, hopefully getting back to being healthy, full of vitality and vigor. We will be here Thursday, neutralizing workplace racism, normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And then Friday, which we did maintain last week, tells you how much I'm enjoying the memoirs of Robert and Mabel Williams. Catherine Massey Book Club, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Really, the Catherine Massey Book Club should be mandatory. I cannot say enough. This program, one of one for many reasons, but one of one for the book club. How many other programs do you know have a book club, have had a book club for almost 15 years uninterrupted, and then where we seriously study, not no pretend read and half-stepping and all that, reading cover to cover all the books that we've covered for the 15 years, and you can see the impact. We read Medical Apartheid a decade ago. That's what we were doing first half of 2016, really leading up to the election of Donald Trump the first time around. That was a part of our study. Harriet A, and massively important, changed the way that I go about the business of counter-racism. And you can see how frequently I have referenced that book, and in a wide variety of context, subject, because it covers so much vital information, including body snatching that we talked about today. And I mean, massively important information. And at the beginning of that book, Harriet A. Washington, black female scholar, victim of white supremacy, she told us she wrote that book in the face of white opposition, telling her, oh, no, you shouldn't be publishing this. Why are you writing? Oh, no, I don't think you should do this. Wouldn't even give her permission. Mr. McPhee has different pictures and such of these white doctors and bloodletting and all the rest of it. They told Harriet A. Washington they didn't even want her to use certain photographic images, wouldn't license them to be included in the book. That would be something I would love. I ever get cool enough to have a nice, massive, permanent counter-racist library that I don't have to move around. That would be my showcase. No lending. A signed copy, hopefully 20-year anniversary edition of Medical Apartheid, hardback, signed, gold embossed cover maybe, that or a signed first edition, hardback, Medical Apartheid. That would be, wow, showcase. And then, of course, we would say, have you read? Of course I read Medical Apartheid. I facilitated a book club on Medical Apartheid. So this is my showcase copy that I don't even touch. I just dust it every now and then. And then I have my copy that I've highlighted and use all the time. Medical Apartheid, if you have not read it, shame on you. Anyway, the import, people say, did you waste our time? You could have been in bed finishing your recovery, or wasting our time talking to this white man about racism and some goofy riot that happened 300 years ago. Well, you can evaluate for yourself. My view, what did you learn, or what is the significance? I'm of the opinion non-white people are so confused and not focused, misinformed about the system of white supremacy and what it means to be white. Just having a conversation with a white person where I asked him, hey, who are the non-racists here? Everybody is racist. Now, he said he likes to think of himself as anti-racist. Y'all hear that? Now, I didn't even challenge and get rowdy. I just waited until we got to niggling. I wasn't even seeking an apology. You all know that. Now, come on, man. I'm a student of Neely Fuller Jr. What I look like asking a white man, you gonna apologize to me for saying niggling, Mr. McPhee? What I look like? I just, hey, what you mean niggling? Remember the segment? Hopefully folks will say, no, I do not remember. But it's kind of infamous from South Park. I think one of the white characters, he was on Wheel of Fortune, and they said it's a word that begins with the letter N, and it had two G's in the middle. It was people who annoy you. He said, ooh, I don't want to say, oh, Lord, ooh. And he says, oh, what? Nigras. And everybody gets quiet and they look at him, and then they go and reveal, and it's naggers. He says, oh, naggers, yes. It had that, I thought of that for whatever reason. You said, Gus T, you're retarded. Go back and do your sick bedtime. Yes, we'll do. But I really just like niggling. As I said, I have heard that word used before. That's not one that shut my brain computer down. Is he calling us niggers? What is he? No, that wasn't it at all. In fact, look here. The inaugural year of the Catherine Massey Book Club, 2012, we read Urugu. We read The Bluest Eye. We read the Turner Diaries, third book that we read on the book club. Goofy, intelligent. Dr. Welsing said that's one you should read. Anyway, Turner Diaries. We read Dreams from My Father. This was in the midst of 2012, in the midst of Obama being reelected. We read Dreams from My Father. Unless my memory is bad, that would be fifth book, isn't it? The fifth book that we read on the Catherine Massey Book Club was George Orwell, 1984. Now, unless my memory is bad again, niggling is used in that book. Same context, going annoyance, discomfort, all of that, and said, that's kind of plantational. Anyway, I thought that was great. Words are important. Equally strapping, both, as I said, somebody has we got to get the strap for someone. Generally, that big, but what Norm stands for, the bigger, blackest nigger you can find. You get your nigger knocker, and we're going to strap him. Has that connotation to me, particularly. Most of the time I hear that term strapping applied to black males exclusive. Like, I generally don't hear, they don't say Tom Brady is strapping. They don't say that. Did you all hear them say that Lionel Messi is a strapping Argentinian? Did you all hear that during the World Cup? Just saying. But talking about the information that people classified as white, them being informed, and I mean down to the distinction. That's what I point out all the time. You can't say that you're ignorant about white supremacy, racism, and then come back, you got all these racial classifications. Well, oh no, that's a mulatto. I see you, Obeezy. Then we got them regular old Leroy and Jamal and them, and then we got Obeezy, Meghan Markle, see, Alicia Keys, see, Michelle Alexander. You can't say you're ignorant about racism, and then you come up with all these goofy terms, mulatto and octoroon and biracial and all that, and say that you are ignorant about racism. That does not make any sense at all. White people are super informed about white supremacy, racism. Even back to back, our author, I didn't ask him today, I should have, informed about racism. Absolutely. You can put this whole book together. Got pictures of Negroes strapping black male slaves and all the rest of it. Yes. Informed about racism. Check. I will add, I do think it would have been phenomenal if he could have included, even if it's not a whole chapter, like a subsection just on what are the burial practices in some of the non-white regions of the world. I did have a moment where I thought, I'm sure there are people out there with extensive medical knowledge than myself. I think white people did go to the continent to learn from black people, Imhotep, all of that, the Hippocratic Oath, but that notwithstanding, not trying to go that far back, I do think it would have been massively important, because I suspect there are lots of histories, accurate, documented, of non-white people where they had anatomical practice, knowledge, where they carried out dissections and maybe even donated bodies and all of that, where it was not through grave robbing, racism, stealing corpses from people and lying about it and covering up so they don't find out about it. I am sure that they had moral, just ways of, even if it's just a different method of carrying out all of this, as opposed to giving the impression that, hey, maybe this is the only way it's done. Nobody else does it any other way. They're just heathen or whatever. They have even worse practices elsewhere. I know that is not the case. That would have been good to include. You can say, we can't include everything. I reckon. Always interesting, the things that get left out. The flagrant racism, I will say, I thought it was great. Armed resistance, I always think we're reading Robert and Mabel Williams right now, to have that included. Black people taking up guns to defend their loved ones after they've departed physically, and we're going to make sure that they don't come and loot your gravesite. Wow. I think that's the sort of history that white people would generally, just think of yourselves as cowards who have never fought back or never did anything. Incidentally, that is a different understanding of what it means to be white. They are so vile and dastardly. Again, where is Sade Robinson's skull? White people's history is so vile and demonic. Black people had to guard the grave sites of their loved ones. That is a vastly different. Jeffrey Dahmer. Fuller did say the essence of what it means to be white is that's real Dahmer behavior, yes? Collecting the body parts and got so many, I got them stored in barrels of delectable Negro too. Yes, yes, yes. But that's real Dahmer-esque. Especially, I told you, we have heard reports where some black people said, we're not going to wait for natural causes. We need these bodies right now. We got to rush this thing along. What does it mean to be white? Anyway, but hopefully, folks, words, I can't say that enough too. Hopefully with this broadcast, we do interrogate white people's word usage, because I think that's important. That happened yesterday when we had Mr. Garrett on the program, the section that he wrote about Sally Hemings. Even where I made an error, he did include her in the book, but it was in such a tacky manner, like Jesus Christ, on equal footing, that sort of thing. I think that is massively important. We were talking about lying yesterday. That is one of the main ways that white people practice racism, white supremacy frequently. That's how they practice deception. That's how they do their lying, incorrect use of words, and or often they just reveal the racism with regards to how they use words. I would even say that's why he made the apology. That's why you heard him say, I'm talking about our guest for today, Mr. McPhee, white man, where he said, oh man, I got to apologize. Now, that's fascinating because there was no apology requested. I wasn't upset. You didn't hear me on here and get the filth flooring, counting white cracker. What do you mean using Nick? I didn't say that. I just read the passage. What did you mean when you said Nick? I had the exact same tone that I had the entire interview. Apologize for what? What did you mean when you used the word niggling, which a word I'm familiar with. We've read it before, looked it up before even. He said, oh man, oh my Lord, I like to think of myself as anti-racist. What? Even had to go through. I can't even think about it. Now, I humbly submit it totally fits. It was grammatically correct. It matched the definition, and it fits with regards to how we think of negras in the system of white supremacy. People classified as black. they are an annoyance. They get on your nerves, and that's how I'm niggling them, just like them nigras. Come on. Then they say to niggle, to cause discomfort. That's what they say about them nigras. That's what they say about them nigras. And even, it works both ways. We cause them nigras discomfort. That's what it means. We cause discomfort. Yeah. And then they say black people cause us discomfort. That's why we got to mistreat them. They come and rape our women. That's why we got to dissect them and take their skull. But yeah, it fits perfectly within the context, lexicon of white supremacy racism. That's how we thinking. I think they have lots of those. Mr. Fuller talked about that. That's why he says in the word guide not to use negative, negate. It's always the same thing. Renege. It's always the same thing. If you're classified as black, somehow negative, something to be avoided, something vile, something evil, always that neg. Certainly niggling. I mean, yeah, we're right on it now. We haven't even moved that far to hide anything. Anyway, but that, always think it is super important words, and just calmly asking, what did you mean? And have them explain it. He said he's done a number of talks. I guess this might be the first time that somebody asked him, what did you mean with that there niggling? Because he would have had a better answer, yes? That would be another one where I would say comfortably, I'm not saying everybody that he's talked to has talked to him about race. I should have asked him that. Have other people classified as black reached out to chat it up with him? Because he said he hadn't been talking about racism. They'd been wanting to talk about the historical aspect of all of this and that, so on and so forth. That would have been one I would have asked. Has he been, to his knowledge, has he been talking to and giving interviews to people classified as black to go? But I think he told us, he said no, he hadn't talked about racism. So I'm going to say, unless he talked to black people who didn't question him about racism, I guess that could be. Maybe they just want to know about the history and all of that. And or the other people that he talked to, they didn't think it important to ask him about that word niggling. That might even be one. I'm surprised that didn't come up with a narrator. He didn't ask, like, niggling? Niggling. Okay. Anywho, hopefully that sort of thing right there, Gus has to be closer to 100% than I was last week. Like, woo! I think last week I was less than 50%. That sort, because even though I had read the whole book, so I already had it highlighted and I had my notes, but even just the wherewithal to be sitting up and paying attention and to go through all of that, I did not have the vitality to do that a week ago. It does take some mental energy to do all of that and just be able to question and sometimes listen quietly. Anywho, that notwithstanding, hopefully constructive, and even to have this white person admit that this was about, the question I asked, this was about a violent enforcement of white supremacy's racial boundaries. You do not come and treat us like niggras, dig up our white women. You do that to the niggras. You go to the nigger burial ground and dig up them. Dig up Leroy, Lakeisha, Jamal. That's what you do. And that's what where is Sade Robinson's skull? And her storage unit looted literally days ago. What did I just say? Murderbelia. We got the clothes she wore the last week before she was dismembered and that sort of thing. That is white culture. Any hoodles, reading nonfiction more important than watching television. I will give an update Now that I'm getting some of my pep back in my step, I will give an update on, hopefully by this weekend, I would think, what's going down. Sade C. Robinson, if we can start getting some of these documents and such. Are we continuing with the emails? We'll let folks know. Hopefully it will be the former, where we can just get to, hey, we got some of the records unsealed. Whoopee. What did they say? We were successful in getting white people to reveal truth. Stop concealing public records. More data to come. Invest if you think the cows is constructive. Listener-supported counter-racist radio. Hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. PayPal button in the top right corner. You'll see the links for PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. Right beneath the button, the Cash App address, cash.app/$ the cows. Much obliged for the folks investing for 17 plus years. Hopefully we've been worthy of your time and energy. Again, the book club at minimum. There are so many books. Michelle Alexander, that's another one. If we read books that are constructive, like Medical Apartheid, they end up being cited for years and referenced and talked about. Even the books that we read that are poor, as yesterday demonstrates, oh man, any book I read from this point forward and the author mentions Michelle Alexander, that is a free opportunity to ask, hey, white man, white woman, you talking about that old lying high yellow wench. You think she was telling the truth? She was accurate when she said that white women like her mother are victims of racism because they have sex with a black dude? Automatic question. That's anybody in the book club. Anybody who's read that book. That should be an automatic question to any white person who has the audacity to talk about that lying high yellow wench. You're going to have to answer that question. There ain't going to be no pretending that you didn't read it and all that. Nope. You done bragged on it for all this time, and you got the 10-year anniversary edition. So and she put that in both editions of the book. She had a chance to correct it and left it in there twice. Bang! Asked our white guest that one yesterday. Make that a all kinds of outlandish questions can be built just off that crazy, or I can't even say inaccurate, lying, deliberately dishonest book. Second worst of all time. So many white people reference it like, oh my goodness. Probably even think of a billion questions just based off of, oh, you want to cite Michelle Alexander? Huh. And just go from there. But yeah, that we just finished it days ago. So I'm just now I think we've had like 2 white guests that I have read where they've cited her book, and I've been able to incorporate questions about that book with both guests, even talking about the lies and inaccuracies in the book, racial brag. Oh my, if I had read that book before, I would have been tearing into that lying high yellow wench years ago, making up for lost time. P.S. Let Gus T know if she ever comes to the Seattle region. Tacoma, that's close enough. Maybe even Portland. Maybe, and that's her home turf. I would consider traveling to Portland to go see Michelle Alexander. Facts. We will do it up Thursday. Neutralizing Workplace Racism. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That said, sobriety would be best. They say all that alcohol consumption, no level of consumption is safe or healthy. Even one drink is heading towards cancer. We have enough problems. We are not healthy. Gusty had missed all last week and everything, almost missed this program. We are already do not qualify for health. We do not need any other ailments or contributions destructively that are going to negate our vitality, ability to replace white supremacy with justice. Much less, you get a little bit too much mad dog, you make it much easier for white people who are looking for us to Maxwell Anderson shot, let's meet at the bar. Sobriety would be best. Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. Even Jeff Dahmer? Max Anderson? Remind us, stop name-calling people classified as black. Stop name-calling and cursing people classified as black. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.